the beginning. Due to some medical emergency, Isabel won't be able to join and co-deliver with Claire. We all wish her a speedy recovery. And thank you, Claire, for supporting us in such a situation. Now, I would quickly introduce the speaker for the evening, Claire Ross. This will be her third webinar in the row after delivering 2 successful ones in the months of October and November. Claire has been supporting new and experienced teachers and teacher trainers in the field of English language teaching since 2005. She has worked on projects with institutions and ministries of education in many different countries, creating and delivering webinars, workshops, and courses, observing lessons and mentoring. Claire helps teachers to teach effective and engaging lessons in schools and universities and develops teacher educators' skills through coaching and training programs, such as the British Council Assured Certificate for Teacher Educators. Claire is also an experienced materials designer who creates online teacher education courses for the British Council and writes primary and secondary classroom material. Now, a little brief about the presentation today. The topic is multilingual approaches in the language classroom. Multilingual classrooms includes a wealth of linguistic knowledge. Find out how to harness your learners' existing language resources to help them to better understand and develop their English language skills. This webinar draws on pluralistic approaches to languages and cultures which advocate the celebration and inclusion of all languages, including minority languages, and see them as a valuable resource to aid language learning. We will look at awakening to languages approaches and activities and strategies that you can use in your classroom. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Vanita, and a very good evening to all of you joining us for the webinar today. As you can see, it's just me, but I will be including throughout the webinar the ideas and the research that my dear friend and colleague Isabel and I have worked on together throughout the 2010s when we worked together in Lebanon, and also that she continues to work on now in Chad and Niger. So let's look at what's on tonight's menu. Learning outcomes for this evening. Well, first of all, we're going to look at some awakening to languages approaches. And if you have never heard of this or you're wondering what this is, don't worry, we will be covering that. So we're looking at how we can use these approaches to motivate your learners to learn English. And our second key outcome is looking at key questions: when, why, and how you can use your learners' knowledge of their own home languages and other languages they know to help them to learn English. So hopefully this is a topic that interests you. That's why you're here. I hope you will be fully participating throughout. And I'd love to see your comments as we go, and also questions at the end. So your first task, if you have a pen and paper handy, please get it now, because I'm going to ask you to think about some situations and write down your answers. If you don't have a pen and paper, maybe you can find an app on your phone where you can take some notes, but it's important you can have a record of your answers so that you can refer back to them later. Okay, so don't just put them in the chat or in the comments now. You need somewhere you can record it. Okay, so get yourself an app or a pen and paper. I'd like you to write numbers 1 to 6. And on the next slide, I'm going to tell you about 6 situations. And for each situation, you need to decide which language or languages would you use in each situation. So there are 6 coming up. So for example, number one, you're teaching. You want to check your learners understand your instructions. Which language or languages would you use? So please write this down either on a piece of paper or on your app. I will give you just a minute to read and to pop your own answers down wherever you can see them. Remember, you need to keep them for later. All right, and it's fine if it's more than one language, you might say, or it depends. That's all right. We'll come back to these later and we'll be discussing them. Okay, so this is going to disappear now. So if you haven't quite finished, take a screenshot and then you can write your answers, continue to write your answers down. All right, so we'll come back to those later. But for now, your next task is to think about your learners and think about how motivated are they to learn English? So if you're joining us on Facebook, can you let us know in the comments how motivated your learners are? You can choose from those 4 on the screen. And those of you in Zoom, you should be able to see our poll and choose the option that best describes your learners. So hopefully the poll will appear in a moment. If you can't see it, that's okay. Just put it in the chat. I can see people in there now. Right, there's the poll. Wonderful. Okay, great. Really interesting thing. My goodness, lots of people are voting. That's wonderful. So that's interesting. In the chat here, I can see most people are saying quite motivated. And I'll give you another couple of seconds, just if you haven't answered the poll yet. Almost everyone has, I think. Wow. Oh, it's almost split. Okay, so I'm going to end that now. Hopefully you can see the results now. So it's almost, I would say the minority here is saying not very motivated. So that's good. It seems like you've got some classrooms where most of the students are either quite motivated or very motivated. That's interesting. Okay. Right, but a range across the board there. And I can see some people have said there's a difference within the class, isn't there? So not, even if you put very motivated, perhaps not all the students always motivated all of the time. All right. Okay, so thank you for participating in that. And to build on that, because I'd like to know a little bit more. So whether you put very motivated or not very motivated, our next question is why? What are the reasons for this? So why are your learners motivated or not? And for this, you can either scan the QR code that's on the screen, or you can click on the link that should be appearing in the chat any moment. There it is. Vanita's posted it. Thank you. And you should be able to see this in the comments on Facebook too. So you can go into the answer garden and give your reasons. It's quite a short answer. So just a couple of words to say why your learners are motivated or not. And don't worry, this is completely anonymous, so no one can see what you've written. So I'm looking for reasons here. So reasons why they are or aren't motivated. Right. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see the answers as you put in your response, but I'm going to share my screen so that you can. So quite a few people there saying they feel hesitant. I'm interested in what the reasons might be behind that. That's quite interesting. And some people are saying they're nervous, they don't know, they think they know. And other people are more positive here: global language, better job prospects, world citizens. In fact, quite a few people are saying this. So global language and better job prospects. So there are the motivators. And then some hesitation, they're not sure, they feel hesitant. Okay, and Shalu has put in the comments here, test takers are very motivated, right? So there's something quite clear to aim for, isn't there, sometimes if there's an important test coming up. All right, thank you for sharing that. So before we go into the main part of the webinar tonight, I wanted just to give a bit of background on the approaches we'll be talking about for the first half, awakening to languages. Now, if you haven't heard of these before, I've got a quote that I think just summarizes the philosophy behind this approach. So there you go. So awakening to languages is a pluralistic approach. And here's a summary from a framework of reference that Isabel and I use for our work. And this is what it says: pluralistic approaches give all languages equal value. They give languages legitimacy by allowing them to be heard, spoken, seen, and written in class. So this is the basis of everything we're talking about today. Now, I thought it would be interesting to compare this with what is written in the Indian National Educational Policy. And also I have a quote here from the NCERT for English. So I'd like you to have a look at all three quotes to see, are there any similarities? And I think I can certainly see in all three quotes there, really importantly in the National Education Policy, promoting multilingualism. Of course, you are familiar with this as teachers in Indian classrooms. As Rekha said, teaching should be multilingual. And then here in the English section, I really like this quote: English is learnt best if it's learnt along with and not at the cost of other languages. So this is the approach that Isabel and I followed throughout our work, and the framework on the right-hand side, which I'll be giving a link to later, if you're interested to read more. We use this to develop teacher training about how teachers of foreign languages, it was both English and French, can use home languages to help their students to learn a foreign language more effectively. So I mentioned we did this together in the 2010s. We worked in Lebanon and we worked with teachers and students from different countries and different language backgrounds. So just to give you an idea here, here are some of the students, the little ones that we worked with, although they were up to middle school and lower secondary as well. So in Lebanon, in the Middle East, the classrooms we were working with, it was the time of the Syria crisis. So there were a lot of Syrian children in the classroom and children from language minorities. So you might think the Middle East, that's all Arabic, right? But absolutely not. So we have different varieties and variations of Arabic throughout Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, and Iraq, which is where most of the children were from, and Sudan. There were also minority languages of Kurdish, Turkmen, Bedouin languages, Armenian, Neo-Aramaic, Turkish, Circassian as well. So I don't know about a lot of these languages, but just to let you know, we are talking about quite multilingual classrooms as well. And I wonder if that sounds similar to your own classrooms. There we go. And Mary is telling us about an incredibly diverse environment in which she, and I'm sure all of you, are teaching as well. So the first things to talk about in Awakening to Languages is that we used these to motivate the children to learn English. So before they even started to learn English, we wanted to make this into an interesting and fun and safe thing to do. So I want to share with you a few of the activities that we use to motivate children, that we got teachers to use with their students. As you're looking at them and listening to them, think about, could this work with my students? Could I do something differently? Could I adapt it for my classroom? So here is number one. This activity is called Flower of Languages. And this is what we ask the children to do. So it's a fun craft activity as well as valuing all languages. So first of all, they take a circle of card and they write their name on it. That's the middle of the flower. And you can see here that this student was called Octave. This is an example we used with the students and teachers. This example is not from Lebanon. This example is from Canada, because the approaches that we used are not our idea, but they've been used in many, many countries all over the world. So first, the child writes their name in the middle, and then we ask them to think about the languages that they speak, the languages that also they hear, the languages that they see around them, even if they don't understand them all very well. And they write these languages, each one on a petal of the flower. So we can see here, they've written German, we've got Luxembourgish, we've got Flemish, English, and French. Now the child puts their petals together to make a beautiful flower, and this becomes a wonderful pictorial representation of all the languages that children have in the class. So we use this in Lebanon, and this is the kind of thing that we got. So the teachers that we used it actually adapted the activity. They decided they wanted to make a hand of languages instead, still by writing the name in the middle and then the languages on the fingers. So I'll read these out. So the languages put on here are, they put Aleppo and Raqqa, which are parts of Syria. So they're looking at different dialects there. They've also got Hindi, because they were thinking about films that they watch on television, Lebanese as well, because the students were living in Lebanon, and Egyptian as well. So can you imagine doing this activity with your students? What would their flower or hand of languages look like? And can you imagine a classroom filled with the languages of your students, and what it might tell you about them, and what it might tell them about themselves and each other as well? So I'm interested in your feedback here. Do you think this could motivate your learners and get them interested in English and other languages? So Pooh just put some examples of what might be on, maybe that's for your hand of, or flower of languages, Pooja. Oh, would your students be similar? Yes. And it is, Rashmi, it is designed to celebrate multilingualism. And in fact, in these classrooms where we were working, it was often the case, because of the hierarchy of languages and because of the value, the different values that we do give to other languages, it was often the case for these students that this was the first time they'd been asked even to talk about what the languages that they knew were. So this can be quite a powerful activity. Mary Sebastian is going to try it tomorrow. Wow, okay, there we go. And Rahul is asking, which age group is this for that activity for? Well, we use this for primary and middle school, Rahul, and actually preschool as well, but without the writing. So definitely the younger age groups, but the top one with the hand of languages, this was actually from a group of teachers. So I think this can be used at all ages to raise awareness, but maybe You wouldn't do the craft part with the younger learners. Yes, okay. All right, good. So yes, so it's an interesting, that's it, Soumya, a pictorial representation, and it's about freedom of expression. So it is a very symbolic thing to do, isn't it, to make these languages seen and heard in your classroom by asking students about them. All right, that's the first activity. Now I'm going to move on to the second. There are 3 from the Awakening to Languages approaches. We've just chosen 3, there are many. And this one is the Pluralistic Portraits. So don't worry if you can't read what's on the screen. I'm going to explain what it is and what we did here. So first of all here, we ask learners to draw a self-portrait. And then we ask them to think about the languages that are part of them. So this could be their own home languages. It could be the languages of their parents or community that they use. It could be languages that they are learning at school. And we want them to think about these languages and what they mean to them. So here we're really tapping into the emotions and languages as identity. So the instruction to children is draw a portrait. Now think about the languages that you know and use at home and at school. What do they mean to you? And choose a different part of your body for the languages that you know. And choose a colour for each language and colour in that part of your body with that colour. So it's not just a beautiful art activity, although you can see the children come up with really wonderful pictures. But the aim is after this to find out, what did the children do? What does it mean? So there is a speaking activity afterwards where children share, where you can ask them and find out the languages they speak and what feelings, what emotions they associate with them. So once again, we are bringing in actively other languages, we are talking about them. Yeah, and as Rashmi has said, mistakes are welcome too, absolutely. So this is a very free activity and children choose what they draw, the colours that they have. So let me tell you what is written. So maybe you can see on the left. This student has said, blue is English, it's in my mind. I use it to communicate with foreigners because she's learning English at school. Green is Arabic, it's in my hand and my heart. That's her first language. The different colours in my skirt show that I accept different people and I like to communicate with them. So quite a powerful story from our learner on the left. And then in the middle, we have a list of languages here. She's written these languages in French because she's learning French at school, and they are Bedouin, English, Arabic, French, Syrian, Lebanese. And here she has written in Arabic, I write Fusha or classical Arabic, spoken Arabic, French, English. My father is Bedouin, my mother is Syrian Turkmen. And then the third one, if I can see, I want to make sure I'm reporting the students' words properly, so I'm actually reading these out. And the third one mentions Turkish, Arabic, French, and English. So I wonder if you did this, what would yours look like? And if you asked your learners to do this, what might their pluralistic portrait look like? And what might you learn about your learners from this? And what could it mean to your learners to be asked these questions about the languages that make up their identity? So let me share the impact of some of these activities on the teachers and the parents and children that we use them with. So here are some words of teachers before and after the training that we did that included these and other activities from Awakening to Languages. So you can see the difference. So before the training, I thought the Bedouins and Kurdish learners were limited. They weren't sure about their ability to learn a foreign language. But after we decided to use the Flower of Languages to help learners to be proud of their languages. And again, at the beginning, one teacher thought the children had a speech impediment. She thought there was something wrong because they weren't able to speak in English. But actually they learned they need to make learners feel secure and not afraid, and that they are able to communicate with classmates and teachers. So I think these speak for themselves, quite powerful quotes from the teachers there. And absolutely, Anchal, children want to hear and be heard, absolutely. And we want children to feel proud of these languages that they know and these resources that they already have. We'll be talking more about that later and how we can help them to use their existing linguistic resources to learn English. Here's our third Awakening to Languages activity. So this one is called Languages in My Neighbourhood, and you can see two pictures on the screen again. So just like with the Flower of Languages, we chose an existing activity from the framework we mentioned earlier. It's not our idea, these are existing classroom activities. And the one on the left is the one that was existing. And this shows a neighbourhood with lots of different languages on the street signs, on the cars, in the shop windows, and different languages that people talk to each other. And then on the right, this is how it was used in Lebanon in the classroom. So perhaps you can guess what happens here. So again, we're drawing, and students think about the languages that they see and hear at home, in the street, as you can see here, in the supermarket, at school, and the languages that they use in those situations as well. So for example, children, if they're learning a language at school, or if there's a different medium of instruction, they're using different languages at school, perhaps from those that they're learning at home. And this really showed us a huge variety that I mentioned before of all the languages that children are exposed to. And I think raising children's awareness of this is a very powerful thing, because our learners start to see themselves as multilingual beings, as having this amazing knowledge of other languages. They don't know everything about them, but they know they exist and they know bits of them, and it's putting together that knowledge and making children feel proud of this to motivate them to learn another language. So another reflective question, I'm interested, do you think you could do this with your learners? And perhaps could your learners do this at home with their parents? Could they help them to do this activity? I'm just looking at the comments, Anchal, this is useful in the Indian context. There are so many languages. I hope you think that. Yeah, that's great to know. And I think by doing these activities, we also learn so much, and by giving our learners the chance to tell us. Jasmine, that's it, exactly. It is to boost children's confidence and to make them feel proud. All right. So again, I want to let the people involved in this work speak for themselves. This time it's the words of some parents who were also involved in the training. So they were doing this activity at home with their children who brought it back from school to work on it together. And this is what they said. So before, you can see some problems here. We had a very mixed classroom. We had children who were refugees at the time, and there was a very sudden change in the classroom. And there were some problems between the students. Children were laughing at each other because of their accent. Children were afraid to speak. They were shy. But afterwards, you can see, as this parent said, this one girl became so interested that she made a dictionary of all the different accents in different parts of Syria. So quite a powerful change. And then finally, the words of a child. So this boy who was involved in the training as well. And as you can see here, he's mentioned how even in his class, sadly, the teacher couldn't understand his accent very well. And the other children were laughing at his accent. But afterwards, he realized that he can change a little bit, he can adapt a little bit, and his teacher can adapt a little bit to better understand each other, and the problems were much resolved. So what can we learn from this student, do you think? To me, this is about acceptance of other languages and other cultures, I think by students and by teachers, by us as well. All right. So before we move any further, we've looked at 3 activities, 3 from the Awakening to Languages approaches, the Flower of Language here, and the Pluralistic Portrait and Languages in My Neighbourhood. So do you think these activities could help your learners in similar ways to the way that we use them, myself and Isabel? So let us know in the chat what you think. All right. And remember, you can adapt them or change them. Try one out. Why not? Good. There's a great positive response there as well. Okay, let's move on now. So those 3 activities are certainly things that you would need to make a bit of space for in your classroom. Perhaps you would do it only once, or you might do one and then sometime later you might do another activity. But now I want to move to some teaching strategies that you could use in any classroom, in any day rather. So it doesn't have to be a special class, but what you can use in your daily classes. And here we're moving to the second key question today, thinking about when and how and why we might use or make use of home languages to help our learners to learn English. So let's go. We've got 4 strategies here, and I really hope that as we look at them, you do recognize them, and I hope if you're using them, you feel comforted in that you are helping your learners by using these strategies. So I hope that some of them are familiar, and if not, I hope that you can see how they can be easily fit in to our daily classes. All right, so number 1, we have a situation to think about. So a teacher, could be you, is using a picture, 4 pictures, each in a different class. And the question to students is, what can you see in the picture? My question for you is, can your learners answer this question in English about each picture? So I'm going to show each picture separately. And for each one, I want you to say, yes, my learners could say this in English, or no, they couldn't answer this question in English about this picture. Are you ready? So picture number 1. So, okay, so yeah, a few words might come out, Rashmi. Yes, understood. Okay. So everybody is saying yes to this one. Okay, I wonder what they would say. They can see in the picture. Okay. Here's the second one. What can they see in the picture? Can they answer this? So someone's saying, yeah, a few words. Maybe not slow learners. Okay, broken words. It depends on the level. Okay, but still predominantly yes. All right, a few more provisos in that one. Okay, here is the third one. And you can see these are taken from your textbooks, right? You should recognize some of them. So picture 3. So look carefully at this one. Can they say what they see in English? All right, so yes, okay, yes, not so fluently, word by word, not a sentence. Okay, a few can answer. Not sure about this one, Kamlesh. Okay. All right, and number 4. How about this one? So this is interesting. Kiran is saying some may try to interpret it. Yes, I like that. Some will only say words. Okay. It's great to have all of your participation in here, by the way. Okay, great. So yes, not all. Okay. Ah, that's interesting. So Himanshu is saying they can express characters in a better way. That's very interesting. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about these and why am I asking you this question? Well, let's give another one. If you think for any of these your learners might be a bit of hesitant, do you think that using home languages might help them to answer? So another question. So if for any of these you think your learners might struggle to answer in English, could using home languages help them? So Rebecca's saying they might know the picture if it's relevant to the age group or children. That's an excellent point, Rebecca. Okay, so yes, some people are saying yes, home languages, they can definitely interpret it. Yes, of course. Right. Okay, and Lafa, they could answer in a mix. Yes. All right, let's talk about these pictures. Why did I choose them? So picture one, and I tried to find something in the book that I would think most learners would find this familiar, right? And certainly for this one, I saw in your comments, I think everyone put yes and yes, definitely. So this seems like a familiar situation and a familiar culture. Now, picture two. Well, what do we need to understand here? It's not just do they know the word in English, but it's the concept, isn't it? So number one, the concept of being in the market and shopping with mother. Okay, very familiar. Number two, the concept of the sea. Do the children in your class all know this? Do you live by the sea? Have they seen the sea? Have they seen it in a film or in a cartoon? This is what we can't always assume, right? So we need to make sure they've got the concept there first before we're asking them to say it in English, because there might be silence because they're not sure what this is. Is it a lake? I don't know. Is it a river? It's not clear. What's on it? I don't know. Right, exactly. They may call it a river. Yes. So here we can make use of home languages to make sure they understand the concept of the sea. And how can we? Well, we can ask other children in the group who we share one of their languages, which it might be that they're able to express themselves in English or another language that we share with that child, to help the other child to understand the concept of the sea. So we're using other children in the classroom to help us to communicate with those children whose home language we don't share. Third one, I thought this one was interesting because in the book, it's talking about a microphone. Again, do children know what this is? Do they have this concept? We need to make sure this is clear, firstly, in their own language before we can tell them the word in English. And the one below, again, this is supposed to be dancing, but does this look like dancing to the students in your class? Does it look like dancing to you? Do people dance differently in different cultures? So again, we're drawing on what students already know in their own language and culture and helping them to make links so that then, of course, we can add in the word in English. So we need to think carefully, don't we, about pictures and context. Okay, and somebody's just noting a spelling error, Michael. Oh, there's always one, it slipped through, well done. I've spelt language wrong, sorry about that. Okay, and the last one, and please make sure your messages are going to everyone we can all see. The last one, so what do we have here? Someone with superhuman abilities. So again, are students familiar with this? Are they familiar with cartoons who look like this from what they see on TV and what they read? Again, we need to make sure they understand this is an imaginary person with imaginary abilities before we start giving words to this in a foreign language. So I hope this has helped to think about what, as Mamta has said, the cultural appropriacy of images that we're showing. We need to make sure everyone has the same understanding of those images before we're using it to introduce another language. Okay, let's move to our second strategy now. Here's another situation. So I'd like you to read it. So the teacher is saying, he's using this picture from the book, look at the man, what's he doing? And the learner says, he is fly. So the learner's made a very common grammar mistake. So I want you to imagine you're that teacher. You want to point out the error. What would you do? So I'm going to give you some options. I'd like to tell you the order you would do these things in. So would you correct the mistake first? Would you ask the learner to correct themselves first? Would you ask another learner first? What would you do next? I'd like you to put these in order. So what would you try first? What strategy would you try first with this learner? So you might put ABC, BAC, you might put some of them twice. All right. Great. So yes, everyone is thinking through, and there are some differences, and that's great too. Okay, and please make sure when you're replying and that your message goes to everyone. So some people are sending me direct personal messages, but let's make sure everyone can see all of them. All right. So our suggestions, Isabel and I, let's see if you agree with us, would be this. So first, we're going to ask that learner to try to correct themselves. We're going to give them the opportunity. We're not going to humiliate them or embarrass them, but just see if they can say it again. So gently encourage. If they can't, we're going to ask another learner to help out. And it might be at this stage that we're asking another learner from the same home language background so that they can help or explain to that learner. All right. And then if that didn't work, okay, then we can correct the mistake ourselves. So teacher correction is third here. And then finally, this is the important bit. So we're coming back to that first learner, the one who made the mistake, and asking them to say the correct sentence. So at the end, they have the correct model. We've got there, maybe through the help of others and maybe through the help of other languages as well. But finally, they're able to say that sentence correctly. So think about how often this situation happens in your classrooms and what's your response? And can we make use of other learners and other languages in the classroom to help those learners to correct themselves if they're not able to? So at this point, I want to link back once more to the National Education Policy in India, because again, we've used these textbooks, we're talking about strategies that we can use. And I think I've found something that really is directly related here. So 2 quotes. Firstly, it's well understood that young children learn and grasp non-trivial concepts, so more complex concepts, more quickly in their home language or mother tongue. So rather than explaining that mistake in English, it's going to be something that that child can grasp more easily in their home language. And the second point here, different languages see the world differently. The structure of a language determines a speaker's perception of experience. So again, we need to think about the languages our students are bringing to the classroom and the links that they'll be making when they see English. And some of them we might not even know about because we don't know that learner's home language. And that's okay. We can make use of it still by relying on other learners in our classroom. All right, let's move to our next strategy now. And thank you all for your comments. I can see them just whizzing by. And I'm sorry I can't comment on them all, but lots of people have been saying it's important to give confidence here when correcting students. I agree. And Mamta saying there, repeating the correct sentence helps, absolutely. And getting that child and the children to repeat the correct sentence as well, that's really helpful. So our next strategy. Imagine you're moving on to a new topic in your course book. The new topic is animals this time. And look at this lovely activity from one of your course books that Isabel and I found. So here it's a speaking activity. the children need to think about the animals that they like. They talk about things the animal does and how we look after the animal. And this is the key point. Tell the class first in your own language and then in English. So it's not only written into the National Educational Policy, but it's here in the course books as well. I thought this is a wonderful example of helping children to share what they already know in their own languages before we help them to say it in English. And Jasmine, this is how you learn English. How wonderful. All right, I like to hear that. And people are saying this is a nice way to connect students. Pooja has tried this as well. Okay, so another question for you. Imagine the next topic in your course book is the desert. So my questions for you are, what do your learners know about the desert? So this is from one of the grade 7 course books in India. What do they know about this already? How can you get them ready to learn about this topic? Because they're going to be learning about it in English. So any ideas? How would you get them ready to learn about it? So we have questions and ways to explain. Okay, so things that we could do. So we've got thinking of it as a place and as atmosphere and as visuals, showing a video. Absolutely. Okay. I'm thinking about climb and animals. Okay. A picture of a camel. All right. Well, maybe your learners already know something about this. And if they don't, maybe someone in their family does. So there's a lot of knowledge that we can't see in our classrooms and in our students' home life. So why not use this as an opportunity to get your students to go home, and homework tonight is talking to your family about the desert. What do they know about it? Have they been? What can they tell you about it? Because we're going to study it in class in English next week. So you might have heard about this approach as funds of knowledge. It's where we make use of existing knowledge, not only in our students, but in the community as well. I mean, one way to do this is to invite people from the community to come into the school to share their knowledge, but that's not always possible, is it? So a good way to do it is to set learners homework, and then we can make use of this cultural knowledge that exists. Yes, we can tell them too, but why not find out what students already know and what knowledge exists in their own cultures? So I've used this example for the desert, and again I was thinking particularly of learners who might not know anything, or they might never have been, or can't imagine the desert, or they've just seen a picture of sand, which doesn't tell them very much. But could you think of other activities or other topics where you could use this strategy? Yes. And people have mentioned a parent-school partnership. That's what I'm trying to get across here. Yes, absolutely. And Chandrima, ask them what they know. Great. And Himanshi is to start with their existing knowledge and then sync with the one I want to teach them more. That's it, exactly. We have to get the concepts there, don't we? It's quite a challenge, really understanding this concept and doing it in another language at the same time. All right, let's move now to our fourth and final strategy. And once again, I hope you can see how this would fit in to lots of classes, and maybe it's a different kind of homework that you're asking students to do here, because they're coming back in saying about what they found out from their parents or from their community. And of course, that conversation will have taken place in home languages. So when they're coming back into the classroom, we've then got the opportunity to reformulate this knowledge from their parents, from their carers, into English, and to bring this knowledge into the classroom in a way that might otherwise not be possible. So let's move to our last strategy now. And this one is about learner autonomy. Now, I'm sure we do think this is important in our classrooms. We want our learners to become independent learners, don't we? And the reason we're talking about this is that in the work that Isabel and I were doing in Lebanon, what we found is that some of the students weren't doing their homework. And when we tried to find out the problem, or when the teachers tried to find out what the problem was the homework was their English homework, and there was no one at home to help them with their English. So people at home, parents or community, for some learners, didn't have any knowledge of English, so the children felt stuck and unable to complete their homework. For some children, the language was French, so their parents might have known some English, but their homework was in French. Their parents didn't know that, and again, the children felt unable to do this without support. I wonder if this is something that ever faces your students, that they found their homework difficult, or they haven't been sure what to do, and they come back to class and say, I didn't understand what I had to do, or there was no one to help me with it. Okay, so I can see some yeses. So the way we approached this was to train the students to rely more on themselves, and also give them some strategies of what to do when they feel stuck. So have a look at this sheet. This is what we gave the children to use to help them to do their homework at home. So step one, so the teacher would set them some homework. They might write it down, or they might write the page number, right, from their textbook, and then get home and then they'd look at the page number and look at the activity and just think, oh no, I don't know what to do. So here's what we train them to do. The first thing is a question to ask themselves, what do you see? So go to that page in your book. What can you see? Are there pictures? Is there a question? Is there a diagram? Are there numbers? So what can I see in the book there? So already we're stopping them closing the book straight away, saying I'm stuck. That's number one. Okay, then once they've looked at everything that's there, number two is to think, what do I need to do? So here they're identifying the language skills that they need to use to do this homework. So is it reading? Do they have to write something? Speaking perhaps, or listening or practicing? What is it that they have to do? So hopefully by now they still haven't shut their book and said, I can't do it. That's it, we're getting them to analyse, Maria Ann. That's the idea here. And then even then, step three, okay, we're still unsure. What do I do if I don't understand? So here it's looking for help. So it could be someone at home, if there is someone who has a little bit of the language that they are learning, or someone who has lots of the language they're learning, fantastic. If not, what other sources do they have? So do they have a dictionary? Do they have mum or dad has a phone that they could use? Or in their textbook, maybe there's a glossary and we need to train them to look and use the glossary sometimes. We need to train them that at the back of the book, sometimes there's a language chart and a grammar table, and we can train them to use that. With maths, for example, we use this, and we were training children to look at the number lines in the back of the book as well, and to help them with their maths homework. So it doesn't always work, but we are giving the children these strategies so that they know the steps to follow, so that hopefully there are fewer times when they're coming back saying, my parents can't help me, so I didn't do the homework. And what we also found was this was giving teachers a way, because we trained the teachers as well on this sheet, so they didn't have to understand the words in English, they just had to help their children to do the strategies. So they can even say to their child in the home languages, well, what do you see? Well, what do you have to do? Okay, you don't understand. Where can you find help? Is there somewhere else in your book? Right, okay, I'm seeing lots of comments here coming through about this one. It really was a bit of a revolution, and although the idea was to help children learn at home, what we found was that children started to do this in class. So you might use the technique 3 before me. Have you heard of that? So before you say, you know, put up your hand to ask teacher, you have to find out in 3 other ways, or ask 3 other students. Well, this is a bit more developed than that, isn't it? It's honing those independent learning strategies. And we found that some teachers were putting this on the classroom wall and helping and indicating it to children if they seemed unsure, saying, okay, I will help you, but first, can you help yourself? And this was also another time when in class, there might be some conversations happening in home languages where children helped to explain to each other what to do. They did the task in English, but they were using home languages to make sure it was clear what the instructions were. Okay. All right, so those are our 4 strategies. And I want to mention finally a piece of research perhaps you've heard of, the Multilingual research that was done in India, because I think it links in really well to what we've been talking here about learner autonomy and learners' prior knowledge. So this was done, I think, between 2016 and 2020 in different parts of India, and it was looking at how English is taught and asking the question, you know, what is multilingualism? Is it good? Is it helping us to learn other languages in schools? And the answer was a resounding yes. And look at this wonderful quote. I'll give you a moment just to read that. So children who are from a multilingual background have cognitive benefits. It helps them with their cognitive processes, their brain processes. And this was found in India, in Delhi, in Hyderabad. It's not my research. This was done in India. You can find the research, and I'll be sharing that at the end as well. And here the point made was that children here have the cognitive skills. They're learning English, but they have the cognitive skills to learn and think. They have a lot of linguistic knowledge, and they have the ability to learn English as well. It's not that they don't have these thinking skills, right? They do, but we need to help them to use these skills to learn another language. So yes, just loved this. All right, so I can see people still talking about the mediation tool, and you like the visuals. I agree, and that's why it worked so well in the classroom as well. And it helped parents to communicate with their children. So let's go back to our learning outcomes for today. So we've looked at 2 things, awakening to languages approaches, those 3 activities, if you remember, and thinking about how this can motivate learners. And we've been talking about those specific situations in class, about when you might use your learners' knowledge of other languages, and how you could use it and for what reasons, because this is the key, is that we're making really good and informed decisions about if and when and how to make use of learners' home languages in class. So it's time to go back to the questions I asked you at the beginning. So I asked you 6 questions. Can you find your answers? Where did you put them? Do you remember? This was the first one. So bring up your answers, and this time you can share in the chat, please. So you are in class. You want to check that your learners understand your instructions. Do you remember? I asked you this at the beginning of the webinar. What language or languages would you use here? Now we're going to get a huge range of answers here, because we've got a lot of it depends. And it depends on the level of English of your learners for a start, doesn't it? So if they're able and you don't have any problems, maybe they can do this in English. But here, this could be an opportunity, couldn't it, to use home languages. So ask a child to translate for another child if it's clear that there is a misunderstanding and your explanation in English is not helping. You might use some reformulation yourself. You might use that learner's home language yourself. You might use gestures as well, and then repeat your instructions in English so that they can get there. There we go. And I can see lots of people here are saying a mixture. Yes, I think that is wise. And of course, when they learn your instructions words and become more confident, this is going to be less of a problem, isn't it? And what's going to make it less of a problem is helping them in the first place to understand what you're saying. All right, next one. So what would you do here? What language or languages would you use? You're doing a reading. There's a really complicated word. What would you do? Yes, and again, I'm seeing lots and lots of L1 native languages and naming your languages here. Which are just going past so quickly. Absolutely. So home language, native languages, Marathi, yes. Great. So again, if you know, you might be able to reformulate. And again, if you don't, perhaps you can use another child in the classroom to help another child who's having difficulty. Yes. And again, we've got several languages here. Absolutely. Yes, I'd use more than one. Great. Let's look at number 3. One of your learners is ill, number 3, and wants to tell you. Number 3. So Rashmi, that's it. You start us off on number 3. Right. So there we go. I think this one, very simple. Let's not make the child struggle in English. Absolutely. So we're being sensitive here. Child is ill. We want them to be free to express themselves so we can best help them. Yes. Mother tongue in which the child is comfortable. Thank you, Sayantani. And then if that's not a language that we understand, we'll get someone else in the class to help. Yeah. Great. So again, thank you for sharing your experience here. Let's keep them going on these last few. Number 4, we've covered this, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore. We've talked about correction techniques, but let's go for number 5. What would you do in this situation? And we're almost at an end, so I can see we've got lots of questions and I will get to those in a minute. Right, so here, again, let's let them express themselves in their home language. And then let's help them to do this in English, because they might have the answer in their home language. Maybe it was they listened, they understood, but they just can't remember the word in English. So let's let them do this, and then either let's help them or get another child to help them to reformulate. Yeah. And the last one, number 6. And I would say, unless you have very, very, very high level students who are able to talk about language in English, I think this needs to employ home languages first. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'd use, and she had bilingual examples here. Yes, that's going to be best here, I think. All right. Thank you for sharing your answers. And I have a couple of reflective questions to finish here. So I wonder if your answers were the same now as they were originally. I wonder if there was anything today that made you think differently. I know we've just been speaking for a very short time about this, but would you answer these 6 questions in the same way? Are you thinking anything differently from the way we were thinking at the beginning? I wonder. And the second question I'm very interested is what have you learned, or what's in your mind right now from this webinar? So what is going to stick with you today? And if you're comfortable, let me know in the chat either of those questions. And as you're thinking about that, I'm going just to sum up some key points. And thank you, Rahul, Rakshmi, Jasmine, and Amaranjan Shaista, all of you, for sharing your reflections so far. Keep them coming. So to sum up, I want to return to this quote from the NCERT English section. English is learnt best if it's learned along with and not at the cost of other languages. And this is what's behind these approaches we've been talking about today. And we mentioned at the beginning how the Awakening to Languages approaches are very much in line with the Indian curriculum and even activities in the course books as well. We've looked at 3 activities. Remember, the Flower of Languages, Languages in My Neighbourhood, and the Pluralistic Portrait. And we can use these to help learners feel secure and proud of their own languages and cultures. And these activities that value languages can help to motivate children to learn another language. And they also teach us a lot about our students. And then finally, we can make these conscious decisions about when and why and how we will use home languages in different parts, in different stages, in different situations in our lessons, with the aim of helping our learners to learn English. And finishing with a quote from some teachers that Isabel and I worked with in Lebanon. They said, it was really interesting, and that was the Syrian children they were working with, they don't feel any more like bits and pieces in our classes. The activities help them to have a place in this big world. And isn't this what we want for all of our students? We want them to feel part of the class and included and important. And that means valuing their languages and cultures too, doesn't it? All right, so I'm moving to references now, but don't worry, there is a handout from this session that you'll get at the very end. So you can take a screenshot now, or you will get these in a handout. And also on the handout are the 3 Awakening to Languages activities with the pictures that you saw. So if you want to use them in class or adapt them, you can. And also to let you know, we got these activities from websites here. So you can explore if you want to and find other activities like this that you might want to use with your own students. And one more thing to tell you about before we move to questions, so start thinking about your questions, is an upcoming course from British Council India on this very topic, where you can get together again and talk more about language teaching English in the multilingual classroom. So that's happening in February and March. What a great opportunity. Okay, so Vanita, I think we're over to questions now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Claire. And yes, not to forget Isabel for your excellent presentation and drawing our attention to a much needed aid, support in language learning, and that is multilingualism. I'm sure the audience must have got some really practical ideas, activities, strategies, and to try it out in their own classroom and to celebrate diversity and inclusion of all languages. Do try out these ideas or adapt them out in your own context. A big thank you to our wonderful audience for being so active, engaging throughout the session. And thank you so much for your overwhelming response throughout the webinar. And now it's time for Q&A. And before that, just a quick reminder that my colleague Michelle, she would be sharing the feedback link shortly in the chat box after the Q&A session. Do click on it, fill the form to get your certificate. So let's start with a Q&A session. Claire, a couple of questions for you. So from the Facebook Live audience, we have a question from K. Banerjee. Should we follow L1, that means first language to second language, or reverse? Or should we go reverse when teaching English in the class? What do you have to say about this?
Well, I'm not going to say it depends, but I am going to refer back to what we talked about in this presentation, which was looking at individual situations on their own merits. And I wouldn't want to suggest a blanket approach always for every situation. So we're teaching English. We're going to try things in English first, aren't we, most of the time, and see what happens. And based on that situation at that time, we're going to make a decision. If students need support, is how am I going to provide that extra support? So can I do it simply in English, or can I do this with the help of another language that I know and that all my learners know? Or can I use another student in the class to help to bridge a language gap between other students? So I think let's just think always about these choices and never rule anything out. We've got lots of tools, so let's look at each situation and see what's going to work. But just to emphasize, we are aiming to develop English. So wherever we go, that's where we're coming back to. So if we've got there through reformulation or help or a bit of discussion in L1 or different languages, let's come back to English and get the point, because that's where we want to go, isn't it?
Thank you so much, Claire, and very well said. And context of situation is really very important. There's a follow-up question, for this. How many days or how much time, should we follow for listening, for sound acquisition? Again, by K. Banerjee.
So how many days should we follow for sound acquisition?
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I think it's just an ongoing process, isn't it? From the very beginning, when we start to teach our learners, to whenever they meet a new word in English, and we know how English sound to spelling relationships can sometimes be a little creative. So I think this is something we continue to do. And certainly, in the multilingual environment that you're teaching in, I think where you may have some advantage is knowing about sounds that are difficult for your learners. So that's where you can focus your teaching. Is that on individual phonemes, or it could be on clusters of consonants, or it could be on word stress, for example, depending on the L1 of your learners. So rather than putting a number on this, I think it just continues as long as our learners need it. I don't know. What do you think, Vanita? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, Claire. Since we have paucity of time, so we won't be able to address all the questions. So I'll quickly, come to the next question. So this is a question by Rahul. Is it right to allow multilingual approaches in the class till learners attain A2 level, the CFR level 8? So is it right to allow these multilingual approaches to happen in the class till learners attain A2 level?
I would say yes. There is no level, in my personal opinion, where this stops being okay. If it's going to help the students to understand better, to grasp a concept, and to learn English better.
Thank you so much. That's very well said again. Question from Rashmi. How can we move from multilingualism to learning English language? Will you be able to share some tips?
Yes, and I think going back to what I just said, it's going back to English and always encouraging and praising students who are trying their best. It's how we respond to error. It's being encouraging, and it's always coming back to our main aim of learning a foreign language. We don't want to, I don't think, eliminate the home languages, because they're there already and they're important and they're already processing the information. We're just oiling the wheels a little.
So in relation to what you said, a very interesting question from Archer. How can I motivate my fellow teachers and parents to also adopt this multilingual approach? And parents and teachers are forcing the language on children even when they don't understand. And it makes children not want to learn. So how can we motivate teachers and parents?
It's something that it's something I also face, because I also have worked with a lot of colleagues who are very much English only, and this is how I was trained, and communicative approach, and I don't understand all the languages anyway, so how can this work for me, comes up often. But I think if you really believe in this, and I see a lot of people here already joining the webinar at the very beginning, already do. I think we speak with our actions. And this is how we convince other teachers, is teaching the students in the way we believe they should be taught. And they will see the evidence in the students. And I think it's also communicating with parents so that they understand why we are doing what we are doing. They don't need to know the ins and outs of teaching, but they do need to know that you are including times, moments, words in your lesson in other languages because you want to help their children to learn English. They need to understand that. And I think that's what they want to. So you're on the same path. But I agree, it's a process, and it's something I'm still doing with my colleagues sometimes.
Yes, thank you for this wonderful suggestion. I mean, we do face challenges, but we can overcome that, you know, if you have self-conviction too. There is a question from Tasneem as well. I think when you were doing this picture, you know, related activities, when you had pictures and how we can encourage students, you know, to have a dialogue. So for teenagers, can we use different pictures like cities of the world, food pictures, or famous paintings of the world, and so on? So will it bring forth the same kind of desired effects?
Yes, I wonder if that question was about, because we've used pictures in different ways, haven't we? I think,
Absolutely.
and my point
Yes.
by including the textbook pictures was not that these are good or bad pictures. That's not the point. The point is, are they helping us to help the learners to learn English at this point? And do we need to use home languages here to help them to understand the picture before we can teach them the words to talk about it in English? So in answer to the question, can you use other pictures? Absolutely, and choose things that are relevant, that your students are familiar with, that they already know, and then help them to talk about this in English. Because if we have a shared understanding first, there is your context. That's so much easier to build language around that.
Thank you. I think this suggestion would really help our audience. There's another interesting question by MD Azhar. He's asking how multilingual approach helps in promoting research-led innovation.
I mean, everything we've spoken about today is based on action research. So the fact that the approaches that we used in Lebanon, Isabel and myself, are research-based and applied differently in different contexts. And the fact that what we did in Lebanon was also taking those ideas and adapting them for the classroom and the teachers in Lebanon and also Niger and Chad, where Isabel is currently working. And the fact that I hope from today, whether it's a small change or idea, or you're going to go and do the Flower of Languages, you'll be doing that in your own way with your own students. You will notice what happens and you will make decisions as a result. And that is classroom-based research and innovation. So the answer to me, absolutely. And please enjoy your experiments. And I hope that both you and your learners learn from them and it helps you both.
Absolutely agree with you, Claire. I mean, classroom-based research is all about experimentation.
That's it. We're all researchers. I think if we
Yes.
think about when we're teaching, if we reflect on our teaching and make changes, we're acting on that research.
Yes. Okay, so we have a last question from Mahesh P. What would you say about our use of online tools for teaching English in various situations? If we continue to use the vernacular for learning English, then it's not going to be perfect or accurate or appropriate. What's your say on this, Claire?
Yes, let's just establish there are different Englishes for different purposes, just as there are with any language. And this, again, it goes back to the socio-linguistic basis of all of this research is the language we use has to be right for that situation and that person that we're talking to and that context, so that when we communicate, our message is appropriate and it's understood. So I think we get there in a language class by helping our learners to understand that they have a choice. And it's not about, you know, banning or some words or not, okay, swear words, but okay, some words are too informal for some context. Chatting online, it tends to be very informal, and that's okay when you're chatting to your friends, but in another context, in another way, this is the language that we need to use. And I think we can get a lot out of comparing different ways of communicating and different language that we use in different contexts. So I think don't ignore it or separate it or say it's not allowed. Let this into your classroom and have a conversation with your students about it so that they're informed and they're able to use the best language and best words and grammar for that situation. I hope that makes sense. I'm quite passionate about that, actually. I don't think English is going down the hill. I think it's becoming richer as we go along. I think all languages are.
Thank you so much for your wonderful suggestions, tips, and strategies. And thank you, audience, and for your thought-provoking questions. Now we have come to the end of the Q&A session. Maua, I would request you to please stop recording this.